What's up, everyone? Friedemann here from Holistic Songwriting, and welcome to the third ever live Q&A from Holistic Songwriting, where you get to ask your questions for about an hour, and I give my best to answer them. So let's see who's already online here. We have Niall D. Brew from Stuttgart. Hello again, D. Brew. David, where are you guys calling from? Maybe we can already get some locations going here. Hey Luke, what's up? Alina, all around winner. Luke Sky, are you already excited for the new Star Wars movie? I know I am. Alessio Bertoldi from Vienna. Hello, Alessio. Eric Montalba from Santiago de Chile, Philippines. Happy belated birthday. Thank you so much, Miss Juliana Morales. Brooklyn, New York. Simon from Denmark, Canada. Representing India is Anurag Deyazi. Is that how you pronounce that? Malaysia, Sweden, Dominican Republic, says Ricardo de Jesus Bello Collado, I guess. Bello Collado. Ah, Jesus, sorry, my Spanish. Guten Abend from Marty. Ace Dragon says hi from Nepal. America with 2 exclamation marks. Greetings from Portugal, Houston, Lackawanna, NY is New York. Is that right? It's New York a state? No, I don't know. Cape Town, South Africa. Kendrick Simon. Lingen Ems. That's hilarious. You're like right around the corner. All right. Maldives, Venezuela. Oof, okay, someone just sent a lot of letters. All right, so let's start with the questions. Cody O'Quinn has started the whole Q&A by asking, when did you realize you wanted to be a professional songwriter? Yeah, I had different runs at this, so I had to figure this out for a while. My first time I knew I wanted to be a professional songwriter is when I think I wrote my first couple of songs, because I really enjoyed that. But then someone told me, if you want to write songs professionally, then you need to write for pop artists, because alternative musicians write their own music. And that for me was like a big, oh no kind of moment, because I didn't like pop music back then. And still don't really like the pop music of the 90s that much. I think what we have going on in the charts right now is a lot more interesting than what was going on back in the day. So back then I dove into some other territories, which is why I did film music and game music and all that kind of stuff. And then I found my way back into pop music, and I guess I started enjoying it when I met my now fiance, who's really into pop music. And I guess it kind of came with that, and I got back into pop music and started to realize that it really has a lot to offer. And so then that made a lot more sense to me to, write pop music again. And so that's how I became interested in that again. All right. From Russia with love, says Alina. Thank you very much. I already have a question. How should I go about looking for musicians to form a band? That's difficult. That's probably the most difficult question you can, there's so many difficult questions, but if you're in a band, it's just difficult, because you are living with these people sometimes 24/7. If you're going on tour, it's like you're living with your family, or you're probably even closer than with your own family if you're in a band. So I just try to stick to what I learned from a book called Good to Great. I forgot the author, but it's a fantastic book you should check out. And in it, he has this rule where he says, get the right people on the bus. It doesn't necessarily matter where the bus is going. So what your vision is and what you want to do is not really that important. It's just really important that you get the right people on the bus, and then you can decide what you want to do. But get the right people on the bus first. instead of deciding like, okay, I want this to be this, and then finding people that kind of like this is really difficult. It's much easier to find good, very talented people that you really respect and that you like working with, and then to figure out together what you want to do. It's usually the better thing because everyone is invested in the project. You have the right people on the team. And so that's how I would go about it. And I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for you out there. I mean, you could just go online and find musicians online. You don't necessarily even have to be a local band. You know what I mean? Like you could kind of like put a note on a post-it board on your local music school is what I would have done back in the day. Today, I guess I'd just go online and be like, hey, who would be interested in starting a band? Doesn't even have to be a live band, you know? So I guess that's how I would go about that. But the core driving motivation behind looking for other band members is to find someone who fills in the gaps for you, who is really good at the things that you're not good at, and to find people that you can really, really work with. And it's really important to trust your gut instincts. David CM asks, Friedemann, what is your favorite genre? Very hard to answer because I listen to a lot of different music. I think probably the music I listen to most is folk with an electronic edge to it. It's probably the music I listen to most just because it's like great music to listen to while I'm working. So just based off of current, like how often I listen to it, it's probably folk. Why so many live streams? I don't know, because you guys seem to like it, so I keep doing this. How do I make my song not too formalized, formulaic? Like I tend to write all the verse, the same melody, and it sounds so basic. Well, what really helps me is to go about every song with a kind of different approach to figure out like a challenge for yourself. And from talking to other producers, and I just talked to one last week actually when I was in Berlin, they kind of do the same thing too. Everyone kind of has their own challenges that they set themselves to just kind of keep the game interesting for themselves. I once heard this really funny story about Nicolas Cage from, you know, he did like this movie, and there was this co-star of his told this story that before the press meeting, Cage like leaned over to her and said like, in this interview, I'm never going to use the words me or I. And he never did. So, you know, that's kind of what we do in songwriting as well. We try to keep it interesting for ourselves by like limiting ourselves a little bit and saying like, hey, you know, what would a song sound like where I only had one instrument in the vocals? You know, something like that. That's what keeps it interesting for me. And cool new directions. So yes. All Around Winner says, can you take the principles and techniques you teach in holistic songwriting to improve rap/hip-hop music? Yes, I think you can. Rap music is a little bit of a different ballgame, though. There are a couple of things that are different here. Mostly that the music is way more loop-based. Like it comes from samples usually. So just in its by nature, the music is more loop-based, as I said. Like it's not as strongly built upon real composition, and the vocals kind of sit on top of the music more than they do in pop music, where the vocals form a cohesive part of the whole, right? So it's a different way of treating music. That being said, though, like if you look at the biggest rap artists out there, like, you know, Eminem, for example, is very much a writer that uses the formulas that I teach in the addiction formula. The only real difference is that the sections are just longer, so they're just more drawn out because there's a lot more text and there's all the rapping going on, obviously. What are some tricks you use to balance simplicity and uniqueness in your melodies? Says James San Miguel. Simplicity and uniqueness. I guess it's the same thing as with songwriting for me, that I try something bold and then I make it work with the formulas that I know. So I start with like this out there idea of maybe hitting like a really weird note or a high note or a very colorful note. And then I just figure out how I can kind of fit that into the song so that works. And that's usually how I get my results. And often what I tend to think about when I write melodies is not so much the theory behind it, but I'm really often thinking about just the sound that I want. And So my first thing is like, the first thing I decide when I'm writing a melody for a section is, okay, so what's the hype level of this got to be? Is there going to be tension in the melody? And what vocal sound am I going to use? Is it going to be sung in falsetto? Is it going to be head voice? Is it going to be chest voice? Is it speech? Is it belting? You know, is there going to be twang, vibrato? Is it going to be a long melody or like with long stretched out notes? Or is it going to be very rhythmical? Is it going to be a one note melody? Or is it going to be like arpeggiatic kind of? So laying out the chords kind of in the melody? Or is it, I don't know, scalular? Like there's all these things running through my head as I write a melody that I kind of try to figure out. And I try out different things with the music. But if the music's good, that usually gives me a bunch of ideas to come up with cool melodies. All right. Do you have any songwriting books to recommend? Says Eden Pooter, I guess. It's difficult for me because, I mean, I started holistic songwriting because I was a little bit displeased with what's on the market at the moment, which doesn't mean that the songwriting books that are out there are bad. It's just that they're not really for me. Like if you want to learn how to write great country songs or songs that sound like the 80s or 70s, 80s, and 90s, then I think there's a lot of good books out there. And if you want to learn how the Beatles wrote music or you know, how Bach wrote music, then there's plenty of stuff out there. But if you want to learn how modern artists that are on the charts today do what they do, then there's very little to go around. So that's kind of the frustration that out of which I started holistic songwriting. So that being said, the books that I do like Pat Patterson's books, The Writing About Lyrics and Songwriting Without Borders, I think they're called. Just because they like make you think about things you otherwise probably wouldn't think of in terms of lyric writing. There was Songwriting for Dummies, which I don't think I've ever talked about before, but like it's that one I thought was decent. Like, you know, forget the title, but I thought that was actually a pretty decent book that gave me some ideas that I thought were kind of interesting. Again, it's all kind of like focused around older music. So not really for me, but like out of the ones that I've read, those are probably the ones that I like the best. Let's see. I mean, there's tons of books I could recommend for people to read. Just in terms of songwriting, I think it's like the information is stretched very, very thin. All right. Who's your favorite songwriter? Again, I'll keep that for another, for podcast probably. Hold on. Is there a difference between falsetto and head voice? There is. Falsetto uses more air, but it depends on the, you know, the vocal school that you're following, because there's CVT and EVT, and both of them have slightly different definitions for it. But falsetto is what you usually hear Katy Perry use, and head voice is, think Queen, like the really high stuff. That's head voice. So that is kind of how do I explain that best? I think that probably makes sense, just the way I explained it just now. DeBrew says, do you believe in a higher spirit of music, like frequencies from the universe that people can hear or feel, or is this just an interpretation of the human mind, which has nothing to do with the universe? So the way I'm going to take your question, because I'm not superstitious or anything, the way I take your question is, do you think that music is truly universal for the entire universe? Is there really such a thing as true music? Or did we just come up with our interpretation of what's good by ourselves as humankind? Which is probably, I don't know if that's the same question anymore, but that's kind of how I would like to answer that. I think it's both. I mean, there are certain things like vibration makes certain sounds, and there's the overtone series, which is very natural. We just kind of took that and just molded it slightly to get to our tuning system that we have today, which makes it a little bit easier to write in different keys. And that's a system, like keys and all scales and all of that stuff is what we came up with. So the way we use harmonics, which is like the nature of music, the basic nature of music, is that's what we came up with, the harmony and all of that stuff. And especially like the Western world came up with, it's usually seen as coming up with harmony and all of that stuff. And then, you know, African countries are more known for like the groove and rhythm underneath it all. So cool. Do you listen to Linkin Park, says Ace Dragon? If so, do you know what type of vocal techniques and screams he uses? I think it's mostly belting, isn't it? I mean, I know he uses some head voice and even some falsetto in some of the tracks, I think. Not sure about the falsetto, but I think there's some few tracks where he does that. But it's mostly just belting, like a lot of energy, very high notes. Klish McClaver says, do you think there are specific chord progressions that make people get hooked? No, I don't think so. I think there are chord progressions that you can write in such a way that they hook people, but I don't think there's like a chord progression. Like I can't tell you like, oh yeah, just use 1, 5, 6, 4 and you'll have a chord progression that just instantly hooks. I don't think that's how it works. There are chord progressions that are really catchy, but that's mostly because of the rhythm. So it's rather about the rhythm than about the harmony, and sometimes about the melody within the chords. Like maybe you have like a top line in the chords that's really, you know, catchy or something like that. But I don't think it's necessarily the harmony, really. That's a good one. Andy Liao says, how did you get used to hearing your own voice without feeling weird? Just takes a lot of practice. It really takes a lot of getting used to. And I also changed my voice considerably from when I started out songwriting. Like what sounds good in your head is very different than what sounds good when you actually sing, like outside of your head. So it was a lot of recording, a lot of listening back, and slowly figuring out what I needed to do to sound like I wanted to sound. Because it is different than what I need to sing like so that it sounds good in my head. So it was a lot of that. A lot of singing, a lot of experimenting, a lot of seeing like what worked and what didn't work. Klish McClaver says, how do you start writing? Do lyrics or the music come first? I'm usually a lyrics second guy, so music first. I sometimes have like a title for a song, or I usually have a lyrical line that I start with. But it's kind of hard to answer this question because I'm experimenting so much and it's changing around so much. Like if I have a lyrical line, I'll just figure out 50 different ways of saying that same line, that same idea, and then I just experiment with different melodies on top of that. So it's kind of both. I can't really say that it's one or the other, because they really do evolve. The song really evolves in tandem. Like lyrics and music really evolve together. It's never I write the entire music and then I write lyrics on top of that. That just doesn't work for me. I feel like that feels really detached. Like I want the lyrics and the music to kind of come from the same place. You know, it's not necessarily what everyone else is doing. I know there's a lot of top line writers who work exactly the opposite. Like they have the music and then they get the music, they get a finished track and they write a melody on top of that. Just for me, that's my personal preference. And I've talked to other producers, like the one last week who has the same thing. For us, it's like we need to kind of write them together because they need to, you know, fit together really well, like to get that cohesion. So it's a kind of hard question to answer because there's a lot of going back and forth. Like it's a complete balance. That's what it really is. Like if I feel like the lyrics are really good, I have to make the melody better, and then that also means I have to change the lyrics slightly, and then the lyrics are a little bit less good. And so it's constantly trying to figure out like what do I use, what do I do here to keep this interesting. Adam Brad says, what do you think of integrating into a song a familiar sound from daily life, like sirens? Oh shit, it jumped. Beeping of a truck when it's moving backwards on a quiet level where normally nobody notices it. So that last part changes it around for me. I mean, I'm a big fan of using sound design in songs, of just doing stuff like incorporating like a cell phone ring or something like that. Or I've even written a song where the music stops completely and we hear like someone shuffling around, like we hear clothes rustling and him like rewinding tape as if the song that we just heard was like on tape, and then forwarding to the next section, and then he presses play and the song keeps going. Like I've done stuff like that, you know, which is very experimental. And I'm a big fan of that. I think it really gives your songs a really experimental, really interesting touch. But drowning it in the mix so we almost don't hear it, I don't know. I mean, do you mean like as in sound design, which I've just talked about, or do you mean as in a song? Like do you use the beeping of the truck rhythmically in your song? Because I've done that too, but then more in film music and game music than in songwriting, to be honest. So really, I think the one thing I think where this doesn't make sense to me, this question, is when I put something in a song, I want people to hear it. I don't put anything in there where I'm like, nobody is going to notice that. Like, why would I put it in the first place? You know? So yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff in my songs that people probably would never realize that it's in there, like shakers and stuff like that, but it's making them move, like it's helping them understand the subdivision of the song, and it helps them move along, so it makes the song a little bit bouncier. But just like sounds from daily life that have no musical relation to what else is going on, probably not. Do you have there was one, damn, it jumped again. There it is. Again, from D. Brew. Do you have a favorite key to compose your music in? Do you compose in any key? How important is this? Not very important unless you're playing with certain instruments. Like if you're playing with horns, you know, the flat keys are better. So F, B flat are really good keys to choose for horns, just because they have to read in different keys, like they're transposing instruments. So F and B flat are good keys for them. C is also fine. G is also quite okay. If you're writing for guitar, then the guitar keys are E, A, D, and G. If you're playing for piano, the easiest key to play in is C. If you're playing for orchestra, C is a great key. Like the less black keys you write for in an orchestral piece, the better. Like you want to stick mostly to the white keys. And obviously you can do modulations and stuff like that, but don't use like the, you know, F sharp major scales are just horrible and everyone's going to hate you and it's going to sound terrible. Like the closer you stick to like what everyone is used to playing, like those really common keys, so like 3 or 4 sharps and 3 or 4 flats, that's probably the best in terms of like sight reading. It just makes sight reading easier, and for certain instruments it's also easier to play. Mahika Babe says, dude, nice beard, love it, just don't shave it off. I shall try. MOSD says, do you think rap should be delivered with a melody? I mean, it's really hard to rap without a melody at all. Like, in almost all modern rappers do kind of pick a note to sing on. And sometimes that note gets higher and higher as the song progresses. Like if it's a really energetic song, I just analyzed a couple of pieces from an artist that likes to start on the flat 3, then goes up to the 4. Like for the second verse, he goes up to the 4, and that gives it a little bit more drama. I don't think there is anything like you should do this or you should do that in hip hop, but that's something I've noticed. A lot more singers, a lot more rappers are kind of singing on one note, but it's not really a melody. It's like it's not even a one note melody, because it really is very rhythmical, right? It's so no, I don't know how to answer that really. How about a course for writing bass parts, says Port Wayne. I actually wrote an article on writing bass parts at blog.holistic-songwriting.com, which is called, I don't know, I forgot, but it's on the blog. There's a couple of tips for writing bass parts. But yeah, I should maybe make a course on that at some point, and it's probably going to be in an arrangement course where I go through all the different instruments and how to write properly for those, which is like one of my favorite things in songwriting, arrangement. I mean, so I'm definitely going to do that at some point. It's just that not a lot of people are asking for that kind of stuff at the moment, so I'm putting that on the back burner a little bit. I think production is going to be more important for a lot more people. David CM says, Friedemann, could you talk about motifs and how to use them on several parts of a song? I mean, so the best answer I can give you for that is probably going to be in the hook and melody master files, because that talks about that in abundance, and it is a really complex and involved answer. So if you're interested in motifs and in general structuring melodies, because there's plenty of ways to structure melodies, not just motifs. There's actually 7 that I talk about in the hook and melody master files. That's the one I would suggest you watch. But talking about the different several parts of the song, there is this myth that you could only use motifs in a chorus, which is just not true. Like, I use motifs for everything I write. Just for the verses, my motifs are usually a little bit longer. And in my chorus, I use very short, very easy to remember kind of motifs that are usually just 3 or 4 notes. Whereas in my verses, a motif might be as long as 10 notes. You know, because in the verses I want to tell a story, so typically lyrically, I mean, so typically I need more notes to fit in all of those words, so that just goes hand in hand. And in the chorus, I have just my big message, and I want to deliver that in with some really distinctive notes, you know. Ace Dragon says, can you train perfect pitch? I'm 15. And do you have perfect pitch? I don't have perfect pitch. It is, as far as I know, it's impossible for adults to develop perfect pitch, and I don't think it's necessary. I have relative pitch, which I think, I mean, it's not just as good. Like, it probably is going to take you a couple more seconds than, it is going to take you a couple more seconds than someone who has perfect pitch, who just hears a note and immediately knows, like, that's a C sharp, A flat. You know, they immediately know that. For me, it's like, I have to think about it a little bit more. But relative pitch is just great. Like, I'm really happy with that, and I think it's important to know that stuff. So it's something to look into. Good hearing, being able to recognize what people are doing musically in songs is only going to help your own songwriting. If you're able to say, like, oh wow, that artist uses a lot of that chord progression, and so that's really their sound, I guess. If you're able to do that, like what I'm doing with the artist series, that definitely helps in your own songwriting, because you can figure out, like, okay, so he did this. Well, what would happen if I did this? And like, oh wow, this sounds really cool. So that's, I guess, in a nutshell, how most people figure out their own style, is taking something they've heard somewhere and kind of turning it on its head and figuring out what they want to do with that themselves. Yes. Joe Graham says, has your vocal range changed over the years? Has it affected your songwriting, or your songwriting affected your vocal range? Yes, it has changed. I've added, I think, a minor third. I could sing up to an F sharp, and now I can do, I think it's a G sharp, so I guess it's only a major second. Sometimes I can hit an A, so sometimes it's a minor third, but that's on a good day. And downwards, I can go a lot lower than I used to be able to. I can go down to a low B, which is below the B below low C, so it's a very, very low note. That's on a good day. On a bad day, I can go to low C, I guess, or C sharp is like safe. Low C might be critical. I'm not sure actually on that, but it has affected my songwriting, because I'm a big believer in that you should sing everything you're writing, and I really do sing everything, including guitar parts and harmonies. Like, I'm just hearing the rest of the harmony in my head, but I sing like the top line or the bass line of the harmony. Bass lines, as I just said, I sing everything. So I think it's crucial for any songwriter to really study vocals, and to get good at singing, and to take vocal lessons, because I didn't take vocal lessons for a very long time, for 2 or 3 years, because I thought, like, oh, they're gonna like make my voice more standard, or they're gonna take this special something out of my voice. And when I did finally start, I found that not to be true. I found that it really just helped me, like, get more control over my voice. It helped me expand my range. Listening back to old recordings now, I'm like, wow, man, this was really bad, really, really bad. So I'm really happy that I did take those vocal lessons, and it really helps me in harmony, in melody writing especially. And I've talked about this before, but I've always found that the best writers, the best hook writers that I know, are also all great singers. And so is Max Martin, by the way. I mean, he's a fantastic singer. He was a singer before he was a songwriter or a producer. Zenful Zachary says, what are some of your favorite ways to signal the listener to an upcoming B section or bridge? That's a good one. I'm going to answer it a little bit. I'm going to step back a little bit and answer the question, what I do to signal to people that a new section is coming. First of all, for that, I use a technique I call tension. I use my own definition of that term, which I lay out in the addiction formula. But so that's like my biggest thing that I do. But another technique that I haven't talked about before is what I call dovetailing. So I have this concept that I say, whenever a new section starts, I have to know at least one thing from that new section already. So I try to like teaser everything one section at least before that. So if I have a really catchy melody in the chorus, then maybe I'll take like the 2 or 3 notes out of that, put like a filter on it, or use an instrument to play the melody instead of having the vocal sing it, and put it in the intro, you know, just like kind of tie that back together. So when we hear the chorus, we've kind of already heard it, and it's even more catchy because of that. And it's funny that you mentioned that we getting to this, but I just saw a video today by Vox. VOX is a fantastic YouTube channel, and they have a series called, I forgot, but it's the music series. Like they have one on popular music, and it's a really great, really well done YouTube series that you have to check out. I think it's only 4 or 5 episodes so far, but they're really well researched. Not so much for songwriters, because it's not really like inspiring that much, but it's just really interesting stuff and really well researched. And the videos are fantastically produced. So I suggest you check those out. And the newest episode of those, from that series, is talking about a lot about repetition and how, you know, certain ideas come back throughout a song multiple times, and how that's getting more and more in pop music now. Like throughout the last, what did he say, like 70 years or something in the video? He says like throughout the last 70 years, you could just take a decade, and every decade after that would have more repetition than the one before. So yeah, repetition is a really important thing. And so that's what I'm trying to say here is like, I don't just repeat within a section. I try to like teaser that's coming, that motif is coming earlier on by what I call dovetailing. And then I might like refresh it, rehash it later on as well. Steelwiz says, the key thing is for orchestral readers, but in pop music, should you have any restrictions? Just stay away from the really difficult keys, I guess. Most people are just more comfortable playing in keys that they know well. And those are the ones that have like few sharps and few flats. So is all I would say to that. Like if you come to a recording session with musicians who haven't ever played your songs before, I think it would suck if you came in with like a song in G flat major or F sharp major or C sharp major or something like that. It's just a pain to read. If you guys don't read music anyways, like if you guys don't know what you're playing, and if it's for you, it's just like, oh, I'm just pressing those keys, then I guess it's fine. Like it doesn't really matter. That being said, though, like the most popular keys in pop music the most popular key is C major and A minor are the most popular keys. And it makes sense. I mean, if you go to the piano, like that's the keys that are just like, that come to you the quickest, right? And then we also have E and A and like the E major, A major from guitar and stuff, you know. Vox series is called Earworm. That's right. Thanks, Happy Ron. Ryan Moreno says, when writing music, should I tailor my sound to what I think the audience wants to hear, or just write the song as I want to and produce that sound to a high standard? It's a little bit of both. So for me, that both of those happen on different levels. It's never like where I'm like, should I do this for the audience or should I do it for myself? That question, I don't really get that question too much, because I ask myself those questions on different levels of my composition. So there is always like the artistic side for me, and that I really write for myself. Like that's who I am as an artist, and I try to like get that across if I'm writing for myself, or if I'm writing for someone else, I try to figure out what their thing is, and then I make it about that. And then there's the underlying stuff, the formulas in the background, the addiction formula, and structuring hooks and stuff like that. That's always going to be there. I don't ever ask myself like, oh, should I maybe for this one write something that's not memorable? Doesn't make sense to me, So I keep those formulas in the background always with anything I write, even if I write something very experimental. But yeah, so I guess the core idea is like what my song is about and what makes it interesting. The reason that I wanted to write that song, I never compromise on that. I try to keep that as clear and the vision of that as clear as possible. Nicolas Cumachero La Torre says, it happens to me that when I start writing a song, I like it, but when I continue working on it, I get tired of it. So I have problems finishing my songs. Have you experienced this? Sure. Not so much anymore. And the biggest difference really in my process is that I write songs just much more quickly. I used to spend months writing on a song and then I'd get really tired of it. Now I write songs, just the songwriting, in a day, a couple of hours. And then obviously there's a lot of refining and, making things, polishing things so everything sounds great. And that can get a little tedious, but that for me is just like going through the motions in a way, like at that moment, I'm like, not even think about like, oh, is this interesting enough? Because the writing for me is done. Now I'm just like on the production, and that's what takes usually time. But I'm really quick with the songwriting part of it. Like the composition for me is very, very quick, the basic composition. And sometimes I have to rewrite things here and there. And that can get tough if you have heard that song for too long and you like got used to your old stuff, but you have to get used to that. Or sometimes what I also do is like, I try not to get used to that too much, which is why like if I get feedback from someone that they don't like that section, if it's for the artist and the artist doesn't like a certain section, then I try to rewrite it as quickly as possible so I don't get used to that section too much. Let's see. It's doing that jumping thing again. Does your book address music writing or is it mostly focused on lyrics? Says SuperRand13. It's actually mostly music. Like there's one tiny chapter on lyrics, but I would say it's 95 or even more % music, actually. I'm definitely a music guy, which might be because I'm not American. So as a kid, I guess I didn't really understand what people were singing about. So maybe that's why, but I'm talking to a lot of Americans in my Skype sessions and they have the same thing. They don't really listen to the lyrics, a lot of them, or they say like, oh yeah, I'll notice the lyrics after the third or fourth listen. That's kind of how it is for me too. Like if I like the song, I'm going to listen to it again. And at some point I'm going to start listening to the lyrics as well. But for me, that's always kind of been like the cherry on top and not really core hardcore songwriting. Is my voice so distorted? Jesus, man. Why did no one tell me this? I'll turn down the volume a little bit on the gain a little bit on the microphone. I hope this is better. Is my voice better now? Okay. Happy Ron says, wait, is it better now? Can you guys, it's not distorted to me? Okay, cool. DeBrew says, what's your favorite movie score? I'm a big sucker for The Fountain by Clint Mansell. I mean, I love that movie, even though it got a bad rap in the press. Like they didn't really like it. I love that movie to bits. I love Darren Aronofsky. He's one of my favorite directors. And Clint Mansell, that score to The Fountain, oh, it's just so beautiful. That's a really, really, really beautiful score. Beauty and the Beast, the Disney movie, I really like that music as well. Like it has like these subtle nods to Debussy, and it's got these really, really pretty melodies in it. Also really, really love Les Miserables. Not the new one, not the musical one, but the one with Liam Neeson from 2001 or 1999, I think. That one is from Angelo Badalamenti. Is such a beautiful score. Like, I get shivers every time I hear it. I love I mean, I have the CDs for both of those, or for all three actually, and I get shivers every time I hear like that. It's so good. I just love those, and it's beautiful movies as well. Okay. Summit Srivastava. Sorry for butchering that. How would you choose a key for a song that you've written? We're talking a lot about keys here, I feel. I don't really, like, it just happens. I just usually play something and I'm like, oh, I guess this is an A. It's not really a big concern of mine, like what key I play in. So it's usually, you know, when I write, I'll write in the key and then I check back with the artist if the range is okay from the melody. And sometimes we have to like transpose it. That happens a lot actually with almost all of my songs. But that's really the only time I really worry about that, is when we're figuring out the key for the artist. It's doing that jumping thing again. Okay, Morgan Flincham says, what about writing songs in multiple languages? Do you do it 2 languages in one song, like Psycho Killer or Manu Chao? What's your thoughts? Have I ever done that? I don't think I have. I mean, I've used anglicisms in German writing before, but I personally haven't mixed it yet. No, I don't really have any experience with that, so I don't feel like I don't know if I should answer this question. Yeah, so I personally don't do it. Yeah, Mass Effect. Clint Mansell did a good job on that. Miki Vukovic. Yeah, you're totally right. Klish McClaver says, do you think that non-native English speakers can write good English songs? Well, I certainly hope so, because I write most of my songs in English. So it took me a long time, and I'm always trying to like keep up with like the latest slang terms, and I try to like kind of work that into my songs without sounding cheesy or corny. It's difficult, but I hope it's possible, because I'm doing that all the time. How has grindcore influenced your writing? Damn, it jumped away. I don't know who said that. It's from Carl Johan Tenström from Sweden, I imagine. Not at all, I must say. I'm not a big grindcore fan, but I haven't really given it much thought. I haven't really listened to a lot of grindcore. So I couldn't really say, to be honest. What is modulation, says Ace Dragon? Modulation means if you're going for, like, if your piece is in one key, like for example C major, and you're modulating to another key, like the easiest keys to modulate to would maybe be A minor, but you could also go to F major or G major or D major. So you're switching keys in the piece. Let me think of for example, Bryan Adams' Summer of '69, right? The bridge goes to a new key. So that's an example I would give, I guess, of this. So it's going from C to E flat, I think. Ryan Moreno says, is there any tricks to choosing keys to match vocal range? Like, is there any way to find keys that can highlight upper register vocals? The way I learned it is the top notes of your song, like the highest notes in your melody, those become the highest notes that the singer can sing, or like a little bit below that, because you kind of want to get the whole range of the singer, is what I learned. And I often do that, but I've started to more and more just ask the performer what they think feels right. Because usually when they think it sounds right, and if they feel comfortable singing a melody, it's usually gives me the best results. And also they can sing it for the longest time. Like, they don't get tired so much. If I have a melody that's up there the entire time, like I can do 10, 15 really good takes. And after that, like, just the quality is going to deteriorate really quickly. Deteriorate. Tough word. Any tips for making and releasing an EP? All right, let's talk about releasing an EP real quick. This question comes from Megan Amokhazi, by the way. It's releasing an EP is actually the smallest part of the puzzle. I know it's the thing that, you know, we care about, and it's the thing that all of our time revolves around, is making this EP great. And it has to be absolutely fantastic. It's not good enough to make an EP that's good. You have to make something that's great, or it won't stand out enough. And by great, I mean something that you're really, really proud of, something that you would listen to day and night. And the test for that I always give people, and that's a challenge, is to say, if you had to invest $30,000 of your own money into this song, or into this EP, would you do it? And if your answer is no, then it's not good enough yet. And that's tricky, right? But that's essentially what you're asking record labels to do for you. They're supposed to invest a lot of money for you, but for what? You know, if your song isn't really amazing yet, if it's really not something that we've maybe never heard before, if it's really, really well done at least, why would they invest all this money in you? You know, you don't obviously have to go to a record label. That's just as an example. But I think it's a good question to ask yourself, like, how good is my music really? And constantly try to like get better and better at that. So that's the core of the whole marketing thing, right? If you want to release something, first make sure that your product is good. That's important. And it seems like, oh yeah, of course. But yeah, I know it's an of course, but it's also what most people kind of overlook, and they think they're good. And in reality, like, their songs are just average and they're just not good enough yet. So make sure it's an amazing EP, first of all, because I do believe that quality travels fast and shit dies quickly. So yes, make an amazing EP. And then the next step is, if it's really good, first of all, it's going to get picked up hopefully by itself a little bit. It's going to develop a life of its own a little bit if it's really that good. And if you have something good, just send it out to bloggers. Don't tell them like, hey, please, could you write a review about my EP? Just send them the songs, you know? And if you have like a cool video that goes with it, that's definitely going to help, because who wants to listen to 3.5 minutes of something that they've never heard of? You know, if I'm being really cynical here. It's much cooler if they have a really nice video to watch while they're doing it. And if the video is amazing and looks really professional, then that definitely helps. And the production obviously has to be good as well. And that usually makes it easier to get to those reviewers. And if they like it, they're going to review it all by themselves. And, you know, try to connect with the right people. But all of that, connecting with the right people, is something that you don't have in control. So that's ultimately why this is really difficult to do. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because, you know, something might come out of nothing. But most of the time it's going to be on you. And that means you have to hustle. And that means maybe Facebook marketing, because that is really easy to find the right target audience with that. It means going on YouTube. It means probably going to different forums and getting people excited about your stuff. It probably means pitching in different places. It means playing your songs live a lot. You just need people to hear your stuff. And yeah, really the easiest way to do it is probably through Facebook and Instagram advertising. But what it comes down to is you need a marketing plan. You need to figure out, so once I release this, what needs to happen next? Like, if it's going to release and I have nothing else planned for that, that's what I call hope marketing. And hope marketing is worth shit. Like, you can't do anything with hope. You can't sell albums based on hope. You need to have a plan. So as long as you have a plan, I think you're usually good, right? And sometimes it might take 2 or 3 EPs or maybe even 2 albums before something really takes off. But as long as you're continuously putting out good stuff and people get to know you as someone who reliably puts out good music, I mean, wouldn't you love that person, right? Someone gives you great music on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, right? You would fall in love with them, I think. Like, that's how we learn about music. Okay, so Max Winter says, hey, I sit a lot in songwriting sessions with other songwriters, often that I haven't worked with before. Workflow is different every time, but it's often very fast and just jamming and flowing. So I don't really have the time to think about in theory what we are doing there. And if it's the best choice to make this song the best version, what would you recommend? So I guess you're asking, you're saying, like, while you're writing, you're not thinking about the theory behind it. And if that means that your songs maybe aren't getting as good as they could be. I don't really think about theory when I write. I mean, it's in the back of my head the entire time. Like, I know this stuff, so it kind of plays into my songwriting, and I know why I do certain things when I do them. But it gives me ideas sometimes. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, I wonder if this is the best melody, and I'll try out a different one based on some techniques that I know. But ultimately, the deciding factor for me is always emotion. Like, if I like it, If it's like makes me feel better, if it just makes my heart beat a little faster, then I'm happy with that. And I'll always take the one that feels the best to me. It's never the one that I could just argue that it's the best, you know. It has to make me feel something. And usually it's the melodies where you like can't say why it's so amazing that are really the good ones. Like if I can tell you exactly why my melody is good, it's probably boring. So Marshall Austin says, how do you find the balance between writing a simple, catchy pop song and wanting to experiment and write what you feel? Well, as I've said before, there's two parts to my writing. There's a creative phase and there's a critical phase. So in the creative phase, I really just experiment and I just do stuff. And at that point, it's really not a song, right? At that point, it's really just a chorus, or it's maybe a sound, or it's something, or maybe a lyrical idea that I have. And it's really that I'm just playing with until I have something where I'm like, okay, this is cool, this is interesting. And then comes the critical phase where I'm like, okay, is this good or is it bad? And well, can we change it? How can we make it better? And then slowly I start to turn it into a song. So I work on like one core idea in my song, and I explode it pretty late into an entire song. So I work on one core thing, and this is kind of how film composers do it too, by the way. Like Hans Zimmer has this one idea in his song, for a movie, and then all the rest of the movie is going to be based on that piece of music. Or, you know, it's not just Hans Zimmer who composes that music, obviously, but for example, for most of those movies, Hans writes one piece of music, and then he sends it all down to his other writers, and those writers write the rest of the movie based off of that one cue, of that one piece of music. And that's kind of how I write my music too. I have like one core idea that I work out, but I'm sure like, okay, this is really interesting. And then I just explode it out into an entire song. And that's where like just all the knowledge and the addiction formula and all of that stuff comes in. So it comes in pretty late. Like the formula, applying the formula comes after I figured out what it is that I want to say artistically. Just Abisri says, do you know how to play a flute? Only in theory, but no, I can't play the flute. I could write for the flute though, but no, I can't play it. As with most instruments, by the way. Happy Ron says, what's the most important thing for traditional singer-songwriters and Beatle fans to learn about the difference between that and modern hits? I think the core thing really is understanding the influence of production. I think production really has changed pop music. Modern pop music is so based off of sound, is so based off of the production, really. That's really what's changed songwriting from what we knew in the 60s to what we have now. And I mean, the Beatles started with that, right? I mean, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was like the album that really was a production album. And, you know, John Lennon was always known for messing around with his vocals. He never liked his vocal sound. He always wanted to have some effect on there. So there's tons of distortions on his vocals and compression, and he loved to mess around with his vocals. There's a version of I'm the Walrus, not the really famous one. There's another one which I heard that once on like a compilation of the Beatles records, and I love that version so much. There's like a lot of distortion on the vocals, and it's really, really cool and really quite modern actually. But I think we have gotten more and more of that. Like people really love experimenting with sounds, and it has an influence on songwriting as well. Like we get stuff like what's that song? Katy Perry's E.T., where the chorus goes, kiss me, kiss me, where they actually recorded kiss me, and then from the second kiss, they just cut up the and just duplicated it, right? That's something you would never write if you're just writing on your guitar. That's something you can only write on a computer. It only makes sense on a computer. So, and it's really taking a big effect on songwriting. Justin Timberlake is another really good example of this. There's a song called Don't Hold the Wall, which is a really excellent example of how production marries songwriting, I think. It's something that you couldn't have written just on guitar. It's something that needed to happen on the computer, I think. I think it's really fascinating what's happening out there. So that's what got me interested in pop music again, because I started out just writing on guitar and I didn't understand pop music. And once I got into production, pop music just kind of opened up and I was like, oh, wow, this is actually really interesting. Oh, someone, like, this is in Cyrillic letters, so I can't read it, or it's not Cyrillic, it's, well, the Russian letters. Anyways, is German your native language? Yes, it is. So English is my second language, which I learned in school and through Family Guy. Well, we have 5 more minutes, guys. I don't know if I could make a quick hook with that acoustic guitar. Well, we could try. Do I have a pick lying around somewhere? Of course not. Never when you need it, right? All right, so let's just try like this. So that was me coming up with something on the spot for you guys. Is that cool? So there's no lyrics, but that's usually how I work. When I come up with something, it's usually just random-ish words. It's a pity we can't join in. That's so true. Is this a thing? Do you know how to play flute, bro? Oh, that's a really good question. Sumit Srivastava, again, sorry for butchering that name, says, how do I choose a different theme than love songs? You know, love songs aren't dead. You know, obviously there's still tons of love songs out there. But what I like to do is when I write a love song is I try to spin it on its head and kind of try something new with it. So just be like, how could I write something that maybe starts almost insulting and then turn that around into something that's really like, that hits deep. That's something I like to do a lot. Or write a negative love song, or just use that theme, love, in just an unexpected way, you know? And so, because if you tell people like, I wrote a love song, it's just like, ugh. But the way I typically work is I take something, flip it on its head, find an interesting approach to it, something that others haven't really done before, or that I've not heard about at least, and kind of work that into the lyrics a little bit. Ace Dragon says, I can hold a note for about 30 seconds, but I can hold screams only for about 5 to 7 seconds. How do I get around that? Singing lessons definitely help with that as well. If you have diaphragmatic breathing, that certainly helps with breath and like really, really breathing into your sides, that kind of stuff. I sound like a Swedish band apparently called Bo Kasper's Orchester. It's probably Bo Kasper's Orchester. I don't speak Swedish. I tried once with Duolingo, but I failed after a couple of weeks. Marshall Austin says, I notice you made up the melodies with scat vocals. Do you ever write vocal melodies with piano? No, I don't. Vocal melodies, never. Other melodies, sometimes. But as I said, I'm I'm a singer. I need to sing everything that I write. So, no, like for me, it's all in the singing. And I mean, I sing really, really everything, like to my bass lines, even shakers, and like I'll have the song playing, and I'll be like, I'll sing like percussion parts, you know. Guys, I think we're almost done with this session. We're going to be doing this again next week, but next week we're going to have some changes. Like, first of all, I don't like the video quality of this whole thing, so I'm upgrading this, and it's also going to be only 20 or 30 minutes. We'll see how it goes next week, but next week's going to look a lot nicer than this, because this, like, just, I don't know, I don't like the look of this, and the Google thing, and the, I don't know, just don't really like that. But let's get to the last, let's say, 2 questions. Saw your Subway to Sally cover. It was dope. Nice, man. Yeah, that's really old, but thank you. My girlfriend said it scared her when she saw it the first time. So not a good move. Let's do one more question. Hi, do you think SoundCloud will be relevant, or is it going to die? Should I focus on YouTube, Facebook, Bandcamp, iTunes, etc.? Says Louis Zapiola. That's a hard question to answer. I feel like SoundCloud is slowly going the way of MySpace, but that's just a gut feeling. But a gut feeling is often like, if a lot of people share that gut feeling, that usually means the platform is going to die, I guess. So what feels right to you? Like, does it feel to you like it is going to die? I mean, all of the platforms are going to die at some point or another, I think. YouTube feels like it's here to stay because they're buying a lot of other companies and merging them to make YouTube even better and bigger. Facebook feels like it's not really that great for bands anymore, honestly, just because when I'm on Facebook now, I only see political messages, maybe sometimes pictures of some bunny or whatever, and advertising. So I feel Facebook is only there. Most people use Facebook only for messaging now, like serious users use it for messaging and not so much for the news feed. That's the word. iTunes, I feel like, is here to stay as well, because that's, you know, Mac owns that, and as long as people have Macs, which I think is going to be for at least a while, iTunes is here to stay. So is Spotify, just because it's so handy. And one more. This is too much fun, guys. So we have to do one more. Okay, some questions about the lyric writing master files. That doesn't count as a question. Let's see. Are lyric writing master files downloadable content, or they come by post? No, it's a stream, actually. So you watch it online, but you don't download it. You just watch it in your browser. Let's see. Cool, some nice words from Lohan Friedemann, I guess. How do you train yourself to sing lower, or is it genetic? Says Aslan Zainal. This is going to be the last question. So for me, it just came with breathing. It could be that it's just because I got older, I guess, that your voice lowers a little bit. Although I was through puberty already when I started taking singing lessons. But it comes with control as well, like being able to sing more open. Like if your throat opens up, you can also sing lower. And there's this thing with people like stretching their neck when they're trying to sing high notes and going like this when they're trying to sing low notes. And often the opposite is better, actually. Like if you're trying to sing low, it's good to like stretch the vocal cords just a little bit. And if you're like, actually, I mean, your head should be level all the time, right? But if you're singing high, you kind of want them to be a little bit looser. So I like, when I sing high notes, I kind of tend to like bow my head down a little bit more now than I used to. Like I used to go like this, and now I go a little bit down even. So it's stuff like that, like just these tiny little techniques. And as I said, like knowing how like to place your tongue, and breathing is like everything in singing. So cool. So I think that's it. Good. One more tiny question, maybe. Do you think we should share our songs on every possible social networking sites? Says Klish McClaver. Yes, I think in the beginning you should. In the beginning, it's just a lot of throwing your shit out there and seeing what sticks. That's kind of how it is with marketing. You just try out a lot of different things, and see if anything works. And then you just focus on the stuff that is working. And that's how I did it with holistic songwriting. And that's what really worked, you know. For example, the first artist series was made for Facebook, but it exploded on YouTube. Facebook, it did really well as well, but YouTube, just went really viral. So the next one was like, oh, fuck it, let's just do this for YouTube, you know. And so all the call to actions and stuff, like I really made that for YouTube and not so much for Facebook anymore. So as I said, it's just a lot of experimenting. There's no right or wrong way, and it depends totally on your music as well. Like if you make really sophisticated folk or electronic music, then maybe Facebook is more your thing. But if you're like really into pop and like 90s trashy bubblegum pop or whatever, then maybe Twitter and Instagram are more your style. You know, it just really depends. Like your audiences are going to be in different places, and you have to figure out where they come from and what platforms they use. Maybe they're on Snapchat, you know, which is a big resource for pop music, I think. I hear. I'm not sure if that's true, but so yeah, it's a lot of trying out what works and seeing what sticks, as with most things really in songwriting related. So cool. Guys, I had a ton of fun doing this. I'll be in the chat for a couple more seconds if you want to ask some very last questions, and I shall see you again next week. Cheers. Now I'm turning this off.